Greetings and welcome back. We start now to head, I think, safely down the home stretch of the course. And before putting a wrap on everything next week with chapter 13, we come home, if you will. We in this section we'll be zeroing in on North America, and I'm always a tad bit more excited about this section due to examining Canada of all places, right? For most Americans, it is somewhat enigmatic, I guess, if you please. In fact, I contemplated splitting this section up into two separate studies, and I had done that in the past, but based on the way the weeks were set up here, um, not able to do that, but we'll be fine. Um, one week we're looking at the U.S., next week Canada. A little spoiler though, I am going to offer a project. We're going to take a look at North America this week. I'll be wrapping it up with chapter 13 next week, and then we have 2 extra days in between Thanksgiving. I think I'll give you guys a small project on Canada just before the break. This particular chapter, we are going to be recognizing the world roles of U.S. and Canada. If you look at your graphic or your lecture model, we're going to examine the subregions of the U.S. and Canada and become aware of Canada's emergence, right? Again, most Americans are fairly ignorant of our neighbors to the north, even compared to most of the rest of the world, which we probably don't know a lot of, not a lot about. So I want to just add some extra analysis and x-rays on Canada. We're going to become aware of their emergence. Major heads up terms here are First Nations. When we talk about the First Nations, we're talking about the Indigenous Indians in Canada. The Quebec Act, after the French and Indian War here in North America, the British, after forcing the French, most of the French out of Canada, they do expand Quebec uh, territorially, and for French speakers, and it becomes under the auspices of the Quebec Act. The BNA is the British North America Amendment. That's where the nation of Canada gets its independence from Britain. Okay. Let's see. What else do I want to talk about in that regard? Oh yeah, I want to talk about the UN Security Council. Right? The UN Security Council, their job is to maintain international and peace and security. The Northeast Corridor, pretty much Washington, D.C. up to Boston. Francophones, these are your French speaking Canadians. We'll talk about them a little bit. Appalachia pretty much goes from northern Georgia up into the Atlantic provinces of Canada. We'll look at that. And when you get in the southern part of the United States, arguably the poorest region. More on that later. The Nunavut. Nunavut means our land. It was the newest province created in Canada in 1999. Houses the Nunavut Indians and Inuits, the Inuit Indians. So, with no further delay on that, let's get going here on this particular section here, North America. And we're going to get into settlement patterns here right off the bat, but as I like to do, I want to set it up with a little intro here. The United States of America and Canada are two of the largest countries in the world. Land mass, Canada ranks second, and the United States fourth. The United States is the world's third most populous country, but it's considerably smaller than China and India in that regard. Both countries are predominantly urban, highly productive, and very affluent. Settlement of the region by Native Americans and First Nations up in Canada began several thousand years ago. And as there's actually, and we looked at this early in the course, there's actually now some evidences that perhaps folks came over through the Atlantic Ocean, right? The Atlantic Ocean and not the land bridge and maybe different people groups. Contemporary North America has been most profoundly influenced, however, by Europeans who settled between 1500 and 1900. Let's break this down here. You got some fill in the blanks there, the settlement patterns. Canadian changes were slower than those in the United States. The French were your first settlers, predominantly trappers. British loyalists were either forced out or they voluntarily emigrated to the Atlantic provinces or the northwest shores of Lake Ontario, which would be the Toronto area. In fact, at this juncture, you should probably be turning to page 528 in your textbook to be able to follow along with the map, right? As I discuss and point out some of these areas. Hostility from the French dictated those settlement patterns. Well, Canada emerges, the emergence of Canada, the 7 Year War slash French and Indian War. The British are victorious, as we know, with the over the French. The Quebec Act. The Quebec Act extends Quebec's territory and grants limited rights to the French. British North Americans want more independence. The mercantile system was getting expensive for the British, and British American relations were getting strained, causing the British to give British North America its independence in 1867, right? Nation gains increased responsibility in that year, 1867, and became its own dominion within the British North America Act, or the BNA. Therefore, an independent Canada is born. Stay on page 528 for the time being. I want to just talk about the land mass and the geographical outlay of the continent. North America has a vast and diverse resource base, which has enabled U.S. and Canada to develop the world's leading agricultural and manufacturing sectors. Nearly all the world's climates are found in North America as well, with the majority of the region dominated by mid-latitude climates. The western third of Canada and the U.S. is mountainous, with some active volcanoes in the Cascades and southwestern Alaska. If some of you may be taking the my spring course, geographic spring course, and we have a chapter there where we look at, so we have labs for each chapter. Instead of in the news, we have labs, internet research, and in one chapter we look at the active volcanoes right up to the present hour. It's kind of a cool website. And Alaska, the southeastern islands, endure several earthquakes a day. They're way under 5, 2 and 3. You think the kind you don't feel, thank heavens. But so there's a lot of volcanic activity out there. The Canadian Shield, you can look at your map on page 528, you can see that. The Canadian Shield and the interior lowlands dominate between the Rocky Mountains and the Appalachian Mountains, which extend from northern Georgia, the Appalachians do, into the Atlantic provinces of Canada. Got your major river systems, you can see these in the map as well. And the Great Lakes, they play an important role in defining both the physical and human geographies of the region. The Mississippi, Missouri, Ohio system, which you can see pretty clearly there, um, play an important role in defining all of this because it not only drains nearly one third of the continent, but it also has served as an important transportation network for the movement of goods and people. So the region, therefore, experiences a wide range of natural hazards, including hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, volcanoes, and floods. And you can take a pause and turn to page 530, and 534 gives you some climate maps and you know some related vital stats to what I just talked about. And then when you're finished with that, I want to start moving into the world roles of each nation. Okay, so the United States exerts global influence politically, economically, and militarily. Although, right, not without not without criticism. Its economy is by far the world's largest, and United States corporations play a major role in globalization. Canada's economic output is considerably less than that of the United States, but its per capita, GNI and PPP is comparable to the U.S. Both the U.S. and Canada are in stage 4 of the demographic transition model, which we took a look at earlier in the course. Your low birth rates and low death rates. Some would say outside of immigration, Canada is probably arguably in stage 5, right, where your population declines due to your birth rates being even lower than your death rates. Some concerns in Canada about that. Similarly, both countries are highly urbanized. In the United States, 90% of the population lives within a 2-hour drive of the city of at least 300,000 people. The highest population concentrations are in the northeastern part of the United States and in clusters around the Great Lakes and along the um, southern, Southern California coast. So since the mid 1900s, population growth has been most rapid in southwestern and southeastern United States, the Sun Belt states. Let's break this down here. Look at the fills, the world roles, the United States, and the United Nations. The UN Security Council. The UN Security Council in that first blank is the most powerful branch of the UN. Its purpose is to maintain international peace and security. 5 countries are granted seats: the US, France, China, the United Kingdom, and Russia. And you can imagine they have always had, pardon me, different viewpoints on what certain things mean, right? Now, the global role of the regional economy. After the 1991 breakup of the Soviet Union, the United States remained the sole superpower. NAFTA, NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, was established in actually it was probably on the drawing board in 1988. It was put into action late 93, certainly 1994. It that toboggan was going down the slope, and you can take a look at page 543, which I think is it's the chart that the consumer good chart, right, that we see every time we do this. think that's what it is. If it isn't, it's applicable. Believe me, you'll like it. U.S. population patterns. U.S. population patterns, population change, and natural growth. U.S. population increase is due in large part to young immigrant communities. This is different from other wealthy and technologically advanced countries. These families have larger families and higher birth rates. And again, you can turn to page 546. Take a look at that visual. To continue with that thought, population distribution. You have increasing urban density. The northeast corridor or slash the eastern seaboard, ranging from Washington, D.C. to Boston. And figure or table 12.2 on page 547 gives you a nice analysis of that point. Patterns of migration in the United States. Latter half of the 1800s, the higher number of immigrants, right, were coming from Southern Europe, primarily Italy, right? Immigrant groups often maintain a younger age for their working population and higher birth rates. And it's kind of funny, I guess, in a strange sort of way. Immigrants, contrary to what a lot of people believe, they probably respond more to the U.S. economy than they do legislation, right? The laws to, the law, immigration laws used as a barrier, right, to keep immigrants out. But generally, they respond more to the economy. If the economy is doing well, or the economy is doing bad back home, wherever they're coming from, they will take the risk, right? As we know. Contemporary immigration patterns in the U.S. Latest census data has about, I think we're well over, I think 350 million people here in the United States. About 35% of that, 35 to 40% is of European descent, which is, most of us, right? Most of you listening to me. 13% African American, and about 18 to 19% Hispanic. That's interestingly up about 5% from the 2000 census data. All right, and it seems to be growing. And in fact, I'm looking at the electorate. Interesting how Texas is voting up until the latter half of 2010s was pretty much a slam dunk Republican. But in 2018, Senator Cruz had a very, very tough election battle with Mr. O'Rourke, and then that was still pretty much in play for most of the night, election night. And if you take a look at a map, I encourage you to do this. If you take a look at a political map of Texas, you'll see that the southern border is increasingly blue, right? But increasingly Democratic blue, and that is the Latino vote, right? The Latino vote that is beginning to make inroads in on Texas. And I'm not saying they're not doing this, but the Republicans probably should start thinking about how to reach those folks, because if the Republicans cannot win Texas, they will never see the white. They will never see the Oval Office for a long time, at least. So just saying, right? Native Americans and the United States government, most important source of income there is casino gambling, which is designed to encourage relations with the wider economy. Internal migration in the United States. The majority of African Americans live in the Southeast. That was, again, 10, 15 years ago, it was 50% of all African Americans lived in the Southeast. Now it's 55%, according to the latest census data. And you can take a look at a couple pages here, going back to the contemporary immigration patterns I just talked about. Page 549 be an interesting visual for you. And then you flip over to page 551. Spend some time looking at those. Let's take a look at Canada and the United Nations. Canadian military, right, known for taking leads in peacekeeping missions. I remember they gained a lot of notoriety back in the mid 90s, being very involved in Rwanda. Population distribution. The vast majority of Canadians are found in a belt across the southern part of that country, nearly parallel to the U.S. border, right? And there's high population density in that area. Probably across the southern border of Canada on a band across from the Atlantic to the Pacific, probably rests a good 80% of the Canadian population. Canadian patterns of ethnic integration. You have your large urban centers, Montreal, big banking center, Toronto, Vancouver. They attract numerous amounts of immigrants. Vancouver attracts primarily Asian immigrants, right, from across the Pacific. Canadian government sets up policies that do not segregate by discrimination. Now we dwell on this more in my we will dwell on this more in my spring course, but in every country you have the $64 words between, I mean, basically positive and negative forces, and a centrifugal force is a negative force, right? So you have centrifugal and centripetal forces, but here I want to focus on the centrifugal, the negative, right? And in Canada, the challenge of Quebec, and the rights of the First Nations. The Francophones, looking at your Phil there, your Francophones. This is a French-speaking Canadian who has a strong sense of being a separate nation within a larger Canadian political frame. And the Francophones see a different culture, history, and religion. And they make up about 21% of the Canadian population. That has changed too from the last census data. The last census data 10 years or so ago, they made up about 25% of the Canadian population. But I think this is due to a lot of immigration into specifically Toronto and Vancouver. Quebec, all right, the Quebec separatist movement. There's several separatist movements in Canada which shock Americans. The Quebec separatist movement gained momentum during the 1980s. Perceived oppression from the federal government, coupled with fear of losing their culture and language, unified the PQ, right? The PQ is your Parti Québécois. That's a political party in Canada. Canada has probably 5 or 6 major political parties. Parti Québécois, the PQ, they are one of those. They're a separatist political party whose purpose is to achieve Quebec's independence. So with the PQ, there's really no mood to integrate. Right? There's no mood to integrate, and they have the ability and the influence in Quebec to gin up a lot of separatist sentiment. So Ottawa, the capital, they have to be wary about placating the PQ, because that could filter out into the rest of the province. And when we get later on, we get into the week, I'm going to have a discussion question and I'm going to have you guys look at, examine what would happen if Quebec was not in Canada, right? Have you guys look at a map and do some critical thinking. So more of that fun later in the week. Several groups within the province do not share the same goal, though, for separation. They are English speaking, right? The English speaking minority in Quebec. They don't wish to be separated from the English speaking majority of Canada, their country. Business owners, right? Business owners, they fear the loss of business. Like I said, it's a big banking center, so it would not be helpful. Recent immigrants, right, who wish to reside in Canada, they do not want to, be separated into a separate state. Then you have several treaties in the 1800s that promised land to the First Nations that have yet to be resolved. If you take a look at page 553 of the inset map there, you can see, shockingly, all the land claims that the First Nations have in Canada. And that has never been resolved. And I remember 2010, the Winter Olympics were held in Vancouver, and the First Nations were threatening to embarrass the country by, you know, staging protests and rallies, in front of the world's cameras if the Canadian government did not at least get to the table in Ottawa and talk about some of these issues. So maybe a little blackmail there from the First Nations protest groups. And lastly, here I want to spend some time on the two regions. I'm going to have you maybe wake up here and do some writing. Well, not maybe, you will have to do that. Despite its influence, the United States has many pockets of poverty, and the gap between the materially wealthy and materially poor is arguably increasing. Much of the poverty is concentrated in the inner city areas that also contain high proportions of African Americans or Hispanics. The United States is comprised of 10 subregions, each within distinct physical, economic, and cultural geographies. In the last 4 years, economic indices show that actually African Americans and Hispanics have never really done as well with the U.S. economy as they have had, in the last several years. Turn to page 560, and I want to, talk about these regions here. The first region is New England, right? New England. And again, you're writing here. You got some white space there. Your second region, the megalopolis, colon, the Northeast Corridor. And page 561. The authors show you that inset map. Third region, Appalachia, colon. We're talking here East Kentucky, West Virginia, Western Virginia, East Tennessee. I don't know where some of you live, but where I am in Somerset County, this is definitely the northern, you start getting into northern Appalachia here. This is Appalachia, we're in the Appalachian Mountains here. And it's one of the poor, maybe not so much here, but you go farther south in the areas I just talked about, you have, one of the poorest areas in the United States. Coal mining is still important in those areas, although it's kind of spotty, right? There's some, as I speak, right? The election is up in the air. What happened in those areas? There's anxiousness, right? President Trump was very coal friendly. The Obama administration and a potential Biden administration were not and may not be, right? So a fourth region, the manufacturing belt, right? The manufacturing belt. Manufacturing belt, arguably goes from the Chicago, Detroit, certainly Detroit, right, on over into probably Pittsburgh, right? Steel making city, steel city. The fifth region, the U.S. heartland, colon, um, the Midwest and Great Plains. The term Midwest is applied to 8 states of the Corn Belt. Page 563. Your authors share a map of that. And with that, you have the Great Lakes area, right? And this is, probably could be, I mean, these are considered the Midwest. This is Chicago, again, I mentioned Chicago earlier, Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, Cincinnati. They are among the world's most productive farming hubs in agribusiness, as well as having, maybe not Cincinnati so much, but certainly Cleveland, Detroit had ties to the industrial belt too. Then you got the South, right? The South, colon, rural areas remain the poorest of the South. For example, e.g., the Mississippi Delta. Major cotton producers, this region, up until the mid 1900s. The upper Mississippi River Valley from Louisiana and Mississippi through Arkansas into southeastern Missouri, specifically that particular area for that type of production. Seventh, the Western Mountains, the Rockies. The Western Mountains, the Rockies. The eighth region, the Southwest, right? The American Southwest, colon, Western Texas on over, arguably through into the Pacific, the San Diego County area, maybe Orange County, which is, we'll get to that. It's generally considered the linked up more with the Pacific, right? Pacific coast. Which is next, right? Which is next, the ninth region, the Pacific coast, from Puget Sound up in Washington down to San Diego, has become a kind of a second national cone in economic importance to the United States, to the Northeast corridor, which we talked about earlier. In fact, California is seventh or eighth largest economy in the U.S. And again, I'm not making any kind of a sarcastic quip here. Some conservatives during this Corona shutdown, they've looked at California. California has been largely shut down, and it's a blue state. And the rebound of the economy has been happening largely without California, in a large part because it's been shut down. So a lot of conservative Republicans, well, some of them anyway, a lot. Some of them have quipped that maybe it's time to allow them to separate from the United States, and then we would lose the 55 electoral votes that is what they would say that the opposition grants them every electoral season. Or maybe it's time for the earthquake to happen out there that we've been told about for decades, right? That it would separate California. So, just thought you'd be interested in that. And then lastly, Alaskan Highway. I don't know where that came from. Alaska and Hawaii. Kind of their own regions there. We don't know what to do with them, right? And then lastly here, Canada, right? Comprised of 10 provinces and 3 territories. Kind of setting this up here for you guys. Turn to page 572 while I do this. Canada has many cultural and economic similarities to the United States, and it's linked to it in many ways. In spite of the dominance by its southerly neighbor, Canadians have a strong sense of national pride and identity. And boy, did I find that out back in the late 80s. I was doing some work over in did some work over in Europe, over in Sweden, and you run into some Canadians once in a while, and the Swedes would ask them, "Are you American?" And I think just about every Canadian I heard ask that question would, in no uncertain terms, uh, bristle and blanch at that with a response of, "No, I am not." And one time I was a little bad about that, and I said to a lady, I said, "But you wish you were." But at any rate, there's a strong sense of national pride and identity. Although the country maintains an identity from the United States, we talked about this, right? There's a secessionist movement by the French speakers in Quebec that threatens to fracture the country. Development of the Canadian economy generally followed that of the United States, but again, with a lag of several years. The manufacturing strength of the country emerged in Quebec and Ontario. The prairie provinces of Manitoba, Saskatchewan are the major wheat growing areas, and Alberta is a major oil, coal, and natural gas producer. Economic growth in the Pacific Rim has stimulated similar growth in British Columbia. The sparsely populated North is comprised of three territories whose economies are historically been oriented on extractive types of industries, particularly mining. Nunavut, mentioned those at the top of all this. Nunavut was created out of the Northwest Territories in 1999 after 2 decades of negotiation between the Inuit Indians and the federal government. Let's take a look here lastly at the regions of Canada. We'll wrap it up and talk about what's up ahead here. Page 572, your map. Canadian provinces were created, and here's some notes, right? Some notes, got some white space there. Canadian provinces were created 100 years after the United States, but those provinces have greater internal political control than do states under our federalist system here in the U.S. Although there's fair amount of freedom for the states. Well, the first region are the Atlantic provinces. Again, your map. You want to take a look at this. The Atlantic provinces: principal recipients of federal aid. Fishing can be contingent on available stocks. There is oil rigs in the Atlantic, so you have seasonal employment out there. So if and keep this in your back pocket, the back pockets of your mind as we get to the discussion questions later in the week. Since that's seasonal employment in the Atlantic provinces, seasonally they are in need of federal assistance from Ottawa, the capital, right? So you're going to need your lecture notes to really do well. I'm thinking out loud here for one of the discussion questions for everything I'm talking about here. Second, and kind of moving east to west here, Quebec settled shortly after the first French settlement. Developed long lot settlements at that time period designed to maximize land ownership along the St. Lawrence River. Montreal is a leading banking center, very important to the Canadian economy, right? Very important to Ottawa, the capital. Thirdly, Ontario, right, where Ottawa is. Ottawa is right on the border of Quebec, and it's in Ontario, strategically placed between the two most populous provinces. Ontario was the center of British control Toronto, Canada's biggest city, and the provinces is the political center of the country. Next, we have the prairie provinces. The prairie provinces make up, Saskatchewan or Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Calgary. Again, Saskatchewan and Manitoba are your wheat producing um, provinces. Uh, Alberta is your oil producers and a lot of coal and mining out there. And Ottawa or Ontario, Alberta is really your economic uh, giant in Canada. And there's a small secession movement in Calgary, and I haven't developed what I'm going to have you guys looking at yet this week for videos or readings or but I'm thinking now I'd like for you guys to do some kind of research on how that's going, kind of do my dirty work there for me. Maybe put it in the news. I don't know. Maybe that's what I'll do. I'll put it in the news. And if you do that, you will be pleasing the professor, but not everyone. Don't everyone do it. So anyway, there's a secession movement in Calgary because Alberta, Edmonton, those areas, because they feel like a lot of their money is going to Ottawa. And a lot of that money in Ottawa goes to Quebec, to placate the Francophones because they don't want Quebec, Quebec leaving. Let's say this too, just backing up about Quebec, the secessionist movement. In 2005, I think it was, back in the 2000s, I think it's every 5-10 years, there is a referendum about secession. And if there's over 50%, the province can secede from Canada. And in one of those years there, they did it back in the 2000s, and they got like 49.3%, and that really scared Ottawa. So coming out of Ottawa, a lot of legislation was heightened toward placating Quebec, and all that. So a lot of your English-speaking Canadians, especially out in Western Canada, they're growing a little tired of this. The West Coast, you have British Columbia, right, up through north up through the Yukon and uh, Northwest Territories, and then Northern Canada, right. Northern Canada um, is the Yukon territories, Northwest Territories, and Nunavut, right. That was a territory developed in 1999. This is where predominantly your First Nations um, live up in that area. And you guys looked at your map earlier, you could see that a lot of land claims to be settled yet in those areas. So put a wrap on this here. North America today, we looked at the world roles of the United States and Canada, the U.S. They're on the UN Security Council. Canadians, we were taking a look at, the beginnings there, French, and then clashing with British loyalists, French and Indian War. The British win that battle, right? Quebec, the French Francophones are, the space carved out for them in modern day Quebec via the Quebec Act. Then in 1867, things are getting too expensive for the British just to try to maintain everything. They were, having hassles with the Americans. War of 1812, a couple generations earlier, we had a great idea of trying to take Canada from the British. That didn't work out so well for us. And so just things were getting expensive, and the Canadians were given their independence. The British North America Act, 1867. Population patterns, right? Population patterns in the United States. We looked at immigration, Hispanics, right? moving toward 20% of the population of the United States. We're urban, right? Largely in the Northeast. A lot of people in the Northeast corridor. A lot of African Americans in the southeastern part of the United States. Then you have your Native Americans, right? Uh, a big economic activity for them, casino gambling, a lot of government assistance to encourage interaction with the wider economy. Don't know how well it's working. Regions of the United States got New England, the megalopolis slash Northeast corridor, Appalachia, the manufacturing belt, the heartland, the South, the Western mountains, Rocky Mountains, the Southwest, Pacific coast, and Alaska and Hawaii. Canada, the population parallel to the border, very urban areas, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, your largest urban centers. Political forces in Canada, though, right? You have the Quebec, the Francophones, spurred on a lot politically by the PQ, right? The Parti Québécois, a separatist party, and you have issues with the First Nations, right? These are not issues that are in secret or in some closet up there. Maybe a little more opaque would be the issues with Alberta, right? The separatist movement there. The regions there you have under provinces, right? Unlike our states, the provinces have a lot of political control. You have the Atlantic provinces. You have Quebec, Toronto, your economic and your political nerve centers, economically to some degree. Not like maybe Alberta is. Ontario, political nerve center there, and the whole country, with their military, a UN leader in peacekeeping. Should probably add that. Talked about that earlier. And that's not a small thing with Canada's image. They do have that. You have your prairie provinces, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. Wheat producers, oil producers, and then the West Coast. Predominantly British Columbia, big wine producers there, and then northern Canada, right? Yukon territories, Northwest territories, and Nunavut. Take a look at what's up ahead. And there we go. Screen sharing. Here's my map here. There we go. Up ahead, we got some guided, the regular drills, but 1 week there, I thought, well, everybody knows the drill, and I was I was getting messages, hey, are we doing anything on Wednesday? Or where's in the news at? So, guided practice, some kind of guided practice on Wednesday. I'll have to look at what I've done in the past. My wife says to me a lot of times, you add a lot of time to your preparation because you should just recycle things you've used in the past. Sometimes I do, but a lot of times I just get other ideas, right? And I think are better. So I'll come up with something on Wednesday. Gonna look at maybe some things evolve, right, in geography. It's not like a history book, right? Benjamin Franklin said what he said, in the 1790s. That doesn't change. But in geography, things are changing a lot. So I gotta stay on top of that. I'm gonna take a look at that, and maybe some readings, perhaps. I'll figure it out. It will be there in the news Thursday. I have to look and see if the Calgary or the Alberta secession movement is on there. And I've known about this for a long time. I've always found it kind of interesting. I'm thinking it probably is. Discussions, right, Friday through Sunday, quiz on Monday. Here are the things I want to, some of the new things that you need to know about. The paper is coming up on the 15th, right? So the paper is now on the horizon, right? It's just kind of like at the top of the hill, maybe peeking at us, right? We were going to have a sign on the paper. It'll be a lot smaller than this, maybe up on a hill someplace. but now it's kind of down here with us, right? The paper on the 15th. I haven't heard from anyone on that. I guess that's good, right? This is it could be a tough paper. And also a gift, right? A gift to you. There is an item sheet for the final. And on the item sheet, what I do customarily with all my classes, I recycle quiz questions. Uh, quiz one, chapter one, not all of them, two, three, four of them from there. I'll recycle on the final. Same thing with all the all the quizzes. So keep your quiz, go back, look at your quizzes, and I'll have some IDs, some short answers on there, and the final, there's several options there, and I allow you guys to choose the options, right? I allow you guys to choose the options, and I think I have one mandatory uh, essay on there that I want everyone to answer. So look at that carefully. Okay, so I think that's about it from here. And if you have any questions, comments, you know how to get a hold of me. And I don't think there's anything else to talk about. So I think I'm going to bid you guys a fond adieu from here. And next time you see me, we will be really on the last chapter, right? Kind of putting everything together, chapter 13. And until then, we'll um, see you later. You guys have just a fantastic week. Do well, and goodbye.